The day my own family erased my name from their future was the day the most powerful man in the world decided I was the only person he wanted beside him. Charlotte Bennett stood beneath the grand chandelier of the Bennett family estate, listening as the people she had spent her entire life trying to impress quietly accepted her rejection. The room was filled with elegant dresses, expensive suits, and conversations about the family legacy. It was supposed to be a celebration of the Bennett name. Instead, it became the moment Charlotte realized she had never truly belonged. Her father, William Bennett, stood before the guests with a calm expression. "Charlotte is a kind person," he said carefully, "but kindness alone does not build an empire." Those words hurt more than anger. For years, Charlotte had worked behind the scenes, helping with family projects, supporting relatives, and solving problems nobody noticed. She never asked for praise. She only wanted to feel like she mattered. But in her father's eyes, she was always the daughter who was too quiet, too gentle, and never ambitious enough. Her younger siblings received opportunities, attention, and trust. Charlotte received expectations without recognition. "The future of the Bennett family requires someone stronger," William announced. Charlotte looked around the room, hoping someone would defend her. No one moved. No one spoke. In that moment, she understood something painful. Sometimes the loneliest place was not being alone. It was standing among people who had already decided you were not important. Charlotte left the estate that evening with a small suitcase and a heart full of questions. The mansion doors closed behind her, but she did not cry. She simply walked forward, wondering what kind of life existed outside the family that never chose her. The city lights surrounded her as she walked through the streets of New York. She had no grand plan. She had no powerful connections. She only had the quiet determination that had carried her through every difficult moment. What Charlotte did not know was that someone had been watching her journey from a distance. Inside a private office high above the city, Alexander Sterling looked at a report on his desk. The world knew him as the richest emperor, the man who controlled a vast business empire and influenced decisions across the globe. People admired his success, but few knew the loneliness behind his reputation. Alexander had seen many people chase wealth, status, and power. But Charlotte Bennett was different. She had walked away from everything without trying to gain anything in return. "Interesting," Alexander whispered as he looked at her file. He remembered the way she treated people when nobody important was watching. He remembered the choices she made when there was nothing to gain. To everyone else, Charlotte Bennett was the daughter nobody wanted. But Alexander saw something the others missed. He saw strength hidden beneath kindness. He saw intelligence hidden beneath silence. He saw a person who had been overlooked, not a person who lacked value. The next morning, Charlotte received an unexpected invitation. It came from the Sterling Empire. She stared at the message, confused. She had never met Alexander Sterling. She had no idea why the most powerful man in the country would want to speak with her. But as she stepped toward a future she could not predict, Charlotte felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. She did not know that this meeting would change her entire life. She did not know that the person who had lost her place in one family was about to become the most important person in another world. The invitation from the Sterling Empire felt impossible to believe. Charlotte Bennett read the message several times, wondering if there had been some mistake. Why would Alexander Sterling, the richest emperor in the world, want to meet someone like her? She had spent years being ignored by her own family. She was not a famous business leader, a social figure, or someone with powerful connections. She was simply Charlotte, the daughter who had always stood quietly in the background. Yet the invitation remained real. The next morning, Charlotte arrived at Sterling Tower, the tallest building in the city. As she stepped through the glass doors, she felt the difference immediately. Everything around her represented success and influence. Employees moved with confidence, important conversations happened around her, and every person seemed to know exactly where they belonged. Charlotte wondered if she was the only person who felt out of place. A member of Alexander's team guided her to the private office at the top of the building. When the doors opened, Charlotte saw the man she had only heard about in the news. Alexander Sterling stood near the large windows overlooking the city. He was calm, composed, and surrounded by the quiet confidence of someone who carried enormous responsibility. "Charlotte Bennett," Alexander said. "Thank you for coming." Charlotte looked at him carefully. "I have to admit, I am still trying to understand why you invited me." Alexander turned toward her. Because I wanted to meet the person behind the name. His answer surprised her. Most people only cared about the Bennett family name. They cared about reputation, status, and appearances. Nobody had ever cared about who Charlotte actually was. You do not know me, Charlotte replied. Alexander walked toward the desk and placed a folder in front of her. I know more than you think. Charlotte opened the folder and saw information about projects she had worked on, ideas she had suggested, and problems she had quietly helped solve for the Bennett family. Her eyes widened. How did you find this? Alexander looked at her. Because I pay attention to things other people ignore. Charlotte became silent. Those words touched something inside her. Her entire life, she had felt invisible. She had spent years helping others without anyone recognizing her efforts. Your family believes you lack ambition, Alexander continued. But I see someone who understands people, solves problems, and remains kind even when she receives nothing in return. Charlotte lowered her eyes. She was not used to hearing positive things about herself. Why does that matter to you? She asked. Alexander looked toward the city below. Because power is easy to find. Trust is not. For a moment, Charlotte saw something beyond his public image. Alexander Sterling was not just a powerful emperor. He was someone who had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him. I need someone I can trust, Alexander said. Someone who does not see me as a title. Charlotte looked surprised. And you think that person is me? Yes. The answer was immediate. For the first time in a long time, Charlotte felt like someone was choosing her for who she truly was. Not because of her family, not because of what she could provide, simply because of herself. Before she left, Alexander gave her one final message. I hope you will consider joining my world. Charlotte held the folder close as she walked back into the city. She still did not know what Alexander wanted from her. She still did not understand why a man with everything would notice someone who had lost everything. But deep inside, a small feeling began to grow. Maybe being rejected by her family was not the end of her story. Maybe it was the first step toward discovering who she was meant to become. The offer from Alexander Sterling continued to occupy Charlotte Bennett's thoughts long after she left Sterling Tower. She had spent her entire life being told that her place was small, that her opinions did not matter, and that she was not the kind of person who could influence anything important. Yet one conversation with the richest emperor in the world had made her question everything she believed about herself. A few days later, Charlotte returned to Sterling Tower, this time with a different feeling. She was still nervous, but she was no longer afraid. Alexander welcomed her into a private meeting room where several documents were waiting. I want to explain why I asked you here, Alexander said. Charlotte looked at him carefully. I would like to understand. Alexander placed a document in front of her. The Sterling Empire is entering a new stage. The company has power, resources, and influence, but it lacks something important. Charlotte glanced at the papers. What is that? A person who understands people. The answer surprised her. Alexander explained that many powerful individuals around him focused only on numbers, reputation, and personal gain. He needed someone who could see beyond those things. Someone who could make decisions with both intelligence and compassion. Charlotte listened quietly. She understood why he valued those qualities, but she still wondered why he chose her. There are many people more experienced than me, she said. Alexander looked directly at her. Experience can be learned. Character cannot. Those words stayed with Charlotte. She had always believed her kindness was the reason people underestimated her. Now, for the first time, someone saw it as a strength. Over the following weeks, Charlotte began working closely with Alexander and his team. She discovered a world completely different from the one she knew. Meetings moved quickly. Decisions affected thousands of people. Every action carried responsibility. At first, some members of the Sterling Empire questioned her presence. They wondered why someone from the Bennett family, someone without a public reputation, was being trusted by Alexander. Charlotte noticed their doubts, but she did not let them define her. Instead of trying to impress everyone, she focused on listening, learning, and contributing. Slowly, people began noticing the difference. She saw solutions others overlooked. She understood concerns that were ignored. She brought a calm perspective to situations that usually created pressure. Alexander watched quietly as Charlotte transformed from a hesitant newcomer into someone who belonged. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Charlotte stood beside the windows of Alexander's office, looking at the city lights below. I never imagined I would be here, she admitted. Alexander stood nearby. Neither did I. Charlotte looked surprised. You did not. Alexander shook his head. I have met many people who wanted a place beside me, but I never met someone who deserved it until now. Charlotte looked away, trying to hide the emotion behind his words. She was not used to being valued so openly. Meanwhile, the Bennett family began hearing rumors about Charlotte's new position. They discovered that the daughter they had dismissed was now gaining the attention of one of the most powerful men in the world. William Bennett could not understand how quickly everything had changed. He believed Charlotte would return after being rejected. He believed she would eventually need the family again. But she was building a new future without them, and Alexander Sterling was standing beside her. Charlotte did not know what the future would bring. She did not know that Alexander's next decision would completely change the way the world saw her. But for the first time in her life, she was no longer waiting for someone to choose her. She was beginning to choose herself. The world around Charlotte Bennett was changing faster than she ever imagined. Only weeks earlier, she had been the daughter nobody listened to, the person her own family overlooked. Now she stood inside Sterling Tower, surrounded by people who valued her opinions and respected her decisions. But Charlotte knew that entering Alexander Sterling's world was only the beginning. The attention she received came with expectations, and not everyone believed she belonged. The announcement that Charlotte was working closely with the Sterling Empire quickly spread throughout the business world. Some people admired Alexander's decision, but others questioned it. They wondered why the richest emperor would trust someone who had never stood in the spotlight before. Charlotte heard the whispers, but she refused to let them control her. She had spent too many years allowing other people's opinions to define her. One afternoon, Alexander invited Charlotte to attend an important gathering at the Sterling residence. It was her first time appearing publicly beside him. As she entered the grand hall, she felt every eye turning toward her. The room was filled with influential guests, respected leaders, and members of powerful families. Charlotte quietly reminded herself that she was not there to prove she was better than anyone. She was there because Alexander believed she belonged. Alexander noticed her hesitation. You are thinking too much, he said softly. Charlotte looked at him. Everyone here knows exactly who they are. I am still trying to figure that out. Alexander answered calmly. You are the only person here who never pretended to be someone else. Those words gave Charlotte confidence. During the evening, several guests approached her with questions. They expected someone inexperienced and uncertain. Instead, they found a woman who listened carefully, answered thoughtfully, and understood situations from a different perspective. Slowly, the atmosphere changed. People who had underestimated Charlotte began seeing her differently. But not everyone was pleased. Across the city, William Bennett watched the news about Charlotte's growing connection with Alexander Sterling. The daughter he had dismissed was becoming someone the world respected. He struggled to accept that the person he believed was the weakest member of the family was now standing beside one of the most powerful men alive. This cannot continue, William said quietly. He believed Charlotte's new position was temporary. He believed she would eventually return and ask for the family's approval again. But he did not understand the person Charlotte had become. Meanwhile, Alexander continued showing Charlotte a side of himself that few people ever saw. Away from meetings and public events, he was not just an emperor. He was a man who carried years of responsibility and loneliness. One evening, Charlotte found Alexander alone in his office, looking over endless reports. Do you ever get tired of carrying everything? She asked. Alexander looked surprised by the question. Most people only saw his success. Few ever asked about the person behind it. Sometimes, he admitted. Charlotte smiled gently. Then maybe you should remember you do not have to carry everything alone. For a moment, Alexander said nothing. Those simple words meant more than Charlotte realized. She was the first person in a long time who spoke to him without fear or expectation. As their connection grew stronger, a new challenge appeared. The Sterling Council began discussing Alexander's future and the importance of choosing someone who could stand beside him permanently. Charlotte did not know that Alexander was preparing a decision that would change her life forever. She only knew that the man who once seemed unreachable had become the person who made her feel seen. And soon, the entire world would discover why Alexander Sterling chose Charlotte Bennett above everyone else. The decision Alexander Sterling was preparing would change everything Charlotte Bennett thought she knew about her future. For weeks, Charlotte had watched the world around her slowly transform. She was no longer the daughter standing quietly behind her family. She was now a woman whose ideas were respected, whose presence mattered, and whose voice could influence important decisions. But despite all the changes, one question remained in her heart. Why did Alexander trust her so completely? One evening, Alexander invited Charlotte to a private dinner at Sterling residence. The atmosphere was calm, far away from the pressure of business meetings and public attention. Charlotte noticed something different about Alexander that night. Without the weight of his title, he seemed less like an emperor and more like a person searching for peace. "You seem surprised to be here," Alexander said. Charlotte smiled softly. "Sometimes I still feel like I am the same girl who walked away from her family with one suitcase." Alexander looked at her seriously. "But you are not that person anymore." Charlotte looked down. "Maybe everyone else changed their opinion of me, but I am still learning how to see myself differently." Alexander understood those words. He knew what it felt like to live under expectations. The world saw him as someone who had everything, but very few people saw the responsibility and loneliness behind his success. "That is why I chose you," Alexander said. Charlotte looked up. "Because I understand you?" "Because you never tried to impress me," Alexander answered. "You treated me like a person before you knew my title." Those words created a quiet moment between them. Charlotte realized something important. Alexander had never chosen her because she needed saving. He chose her because he respected who she already was. The next day, the Sterling Empire made an announcement that surprised the entire business world. Alexander Sterling revealed that Charlotte Bennett would become his official partner in leading the future of the empire. The news spread quickly. People who once ignored Charlotte now wanted to know more about her. The Bennett family was among the first to hear the announcement. William Bennett stared at the news report in disbelief. The daughter he had dismissed was now standing beside the most powerful man in the world. He remembered every time Charlotte had been overlooked and every moment when he assumed she would never achieve anything significant. For the first time, he wondered if he had misunderstood her completely. Meanwhile, Charlotte faced a new challenge. Becoming part of Alexander's world meant entering a place where every choice was examined. Some people believed she was only there because of her connection with Alexander. Others questioned whether she could handle the responsibility. But Charlotte did not respond with anger. She continued doing what she had always done. She listened. She learned. She helped people. Slowly, even those who doubted her began to recognize her strength. One afternoon, Alexander watched Charlotte during a meeting. She calmly handled difficult questions and found solutions that others had missed. After the meeting ended, he approached her. "You realize you just changed the opinion of half the room," he said. Charlotte smiled. "I was not trying to change their opinion." Alexander looked at her with admiration. "That is exactly why you did." Later that evening, Charlotte stood beside Alexander overlooking the city. She thought about the girl who left the Bennett estate believing she had lost everything. Now she understood the truth. She had not lost her place. She had simply been searching for the place where she truly belonged. But neither Charlotte nor Alexander knew that the past they thought was behind them was about to return. And this time, her family would come looking for the daughter they once refused to choose. The return of the Bennett family was something Charlotte Bennett never expected to face again. For months, she had focused on building a new life, learning from Alexander Sterling, and discovering the confidence she never had before. She believed the painful chapter with her family was finally behind her. But the past had a way of returning when people least expected it. The message arrived on a quiet morning. It was from William Bennett. Charlotte stared at the screen for a long moment before opening it. "We need to talk." For simple words carried years of memories. She remembered the night she left the family estate. She remembered standing in that room, hoping someone would tell her she mattered. Nobody did. Now, after everything had changed, her father wanted a conversation. Alexander noticed her expression when he entered the room. "Is something wrong?" Charlotte placed the phone down. "My father wants to meet." Alexander did not tell her what to do. He simply asked, "Do you want to go?" Charlotte thought about the question carefully. For the first time, she was not making a decision because she wanted someone's approval. She was making a decision for herself. "Yes," she answered. "I need to understand why." The Bennett estate looked exactly as Charlotte remembered. The same large entrance. The same elegant rooms. The same place where she once felt like she did not belong. But this time, she walked through the doors differently. She was not the forgotten daughter returning to ask for acceptance. She was a woman who had built her own place in the world. William Bennett was waiting for her in the family office. When he saw Charlotte, his expression changed. He expected the same quiet daughter who left months earlier. Instead, he saw someone confident and calm. "You have changed," William said. Charlotte looked at him. "I think I finally became who I was always meant to be." The answer surprised him. William took a moment before speaking again. "I know things were not handled correctly." Charlotte remained silent. She wanted to hear the truth, not excuses. "I believe power and success were the only things that mattered," William admitted. "I thought you were too gentle for this world." Charlotte looked at the room around her. "Being kind was never my weakness." William lowered his eyes. For the first time, he understood that the quality he ignored was the very thing that made Charlotte special. But before the conversation could continue, he revealed the real reason he wanted to see her. The Bennett family was facing difficult decisions, and they needed Charlotte's help. Years ago, they ignored her ideas. Now, they needed the person who had always understood the business better than anyone realized. Charlotte felt the weight of the moment. Part of her wanted to prove that she was needed, but another part knew she no longer needed to prove anything. "I will help if it is the right thing to do," Charlotte said. "But I will not return to being someone who is invisible." William nodded slowly. He knew she was right. Later that evening, Charlotte returned to Sterling residence. Alexander was waiting for her. "How did it go?" he asked. Charlotte smiled softly. "Different than I expected." Alexander noticed the change in her expression. "Are you okay?" Charlotte looked toward the city lights. "I think I finally stopped waiting for my family to choose me." Alexander stood beside her. "And what did you choose?" Charlotte looked at him and smiled. "I chose myself." But neither of them knew that the Bennett family's request would soon reveal a hidden truth that could change how the entire world saw Charlotte Bennett. The hidden truth behind Charlotte Bennett's past was something even she never expected to discover. After meeting with her father, Charlotte believed she finally understood why the Bennett family had treated her differently for so many years. But the conversation left one question unanswered. Why had they ignored her abilities when they had depended on them all along? The answer came a few days later when William Bennett contacted her again. This time, his voice sounded different. There was no pride, no certainty, only honesty. "Charlotte, there is something you need to know about your history with this family." Charlotte listened quietly as William explained that years ago, many of the ideas that helped the Bennett company grow had come from her. When she was younger, Charlotte had spent countless hours studying the business, finding solutions, and suggesting improvements. But because she was young, and because her opinions were not considered important, her contributions were quietly taken and credited to others. Charlotte felt a mixture of emotions. She was not angry because she wanted recognition. She was hurt because she realized how long she had been invisible. "Why did you never tell me?" Charlotte asked. William looked away. "Because I thought the family needed a stronger image. I thought people would not respect ideas coming from you." Those words revealed the greatest mistake the Bennett family had made. They were not rejecting Charlotte because she lacked value. They rejected her because they failed to see it. Meanwhile, Alexander Sterling learned about the situation and immediately understood what it meant. Charlotte had always believed she was someone who needed to prove herself. But the truth was that she had been creating value long before anyone recognized her. "You know what surprises me?" Alexander said as they stood together in his office. Charlotte looked at him. "What? You still care about people who never gave you the same kindness?" Charlotte smiled slightly. "Maybe because I know what it feels like to be forgotten." Alexander looked at her with admiration. That was the reason he respected her so deeply. Charlotte had every reason to become bitter, but she chose understanding instead. The news about Charlotte's hidden contributions soon reached the business world. People who once questioned why Alexander trusted her began seeing the truth. She was not chosen because of luck. She was chosen because she had qualities that could not be measured by money or status. At the Bennett family estate, William looked through old documents and memories. He realized that the daughter he overlooked had always been the person who understood the family better than anyone else. For the first time, he saw Charlotte not as a child who needed guidance, but as a woman who had always carried wisdom beyond her years. The next major event of the Sterling Empire approached, and Alexander made a decision that surprised everyone. He wanted Charlotte to stand beside him in front of the entire world, not as someone who needed protection, not as someone who needed approval, but as an equal. Charlotte hesitated when she heard the announcement. "Are you sure?" she asked. Alexander answered without hesitation. I have never been more certain of anything. As Charlotte prepared for the moment that would change how everyone viewed her, she remembered the girl who once walked away from the Bennett estate believing she had lost everything. Now she understood the truth. She had not lost her future. She had been walking toward it all along. And soon, the world would see the woman Alexander Sterling had chosen to stand beside him. The day of the Sterling Empire announcement arrived, and Charlotte Bennett stood in front of the mirror wondering how much her life had changed. Not long ago, she had walked away from her family estate carrying a single suitcase, believing she had lost everything. Now she was preparing to stand beside Alexander Sterling in front of the entire world. But this time, she was not standing there as someone who needed to be accepted. She was standing there as someone who finally understood her own worth. The grand hall of the Sterling headquarters was filled with important guests, business leaders, and members of the international community. Cameras captured every moment as Alexander entered with Charlotte beside him. Many people expected to see a powerful emperor protecting someone inexperienced. Instead, they saw two people standing as equals. Alexander looked at Charlotte before they stepped forward. "Are you ready?" he asked. Charlotte took a deep breath and smiled. "I think I am." Alexander nodded. "That is all you need." When they appeared before the guests, Alexander spoke about the future of the Sterling Empire. But he did not focus only on business success or financial achievements. He spoke about trust, understanding, and the importance of choosing people who bring out the best in others. Then he introduced Charlotte. "Charlotte Bennett is not standing beside me because of her family name," Alexander said. "She is here because she has proven her intelligence, compassion, and strength." The room became quiet as people listened. Charlotte looked across the crowd and remembered every moment when she was told she was not enough. She remembered every time her ideas were ignored and every time she wondered if she had any value. But standing there beside Alexander, she finally understood something. The opinions of people who failed to see her could never define who she was. After the announcement, reactions spread quickly. Many who once doubted Charlotte began changing their opinions. They saw the woman who had earned Alexander's trust and understood why he chose her. However, the most emotional reaction came from William Bennett. Watching his daughter receive the respect she always deserved forced him to confront the past. He realized that Charlotte had never needed to become someone different. She had only needed someone to believe in her. Later that evening, William asked Charlotte for a private conversation. They stood together in the same garden where Charlotte had once felt like she did not belong. "I spent years thinking I knew what was best for this family," William admitted. "But I failed to see the person who cared about it the most." Charlotte listened quietly. She had waited a long time for him to understand. "I cannot change the past," William continued, "but I want to do better moving forward." Charlotte looked at him and felt the weight of years slowly becoming lighter. She did not forget what happened, but she no longer carried the pain the same way. "Thank you for finally seeing me," she said. It was not a perfect ending. It was a new beginning. When Charlotte returned to Alexander, he noticed the peaceful expression on her face. "How do you feel?" he asked. Charlotte looked toward the city lights. "Like I finally stopped searching for a place where I belong." Alexander smiled. "And did you find one?" Charlotte looked at him. "Yes." In that moment, Alexander realized something too. The woman everyone overlooked had become the person who brought warmth into a life built around power and responsibility. But the final chapter of their journey was still waiting. The world had seen Charlotte's rise, but soon everyone would understand why the richest emperor had chosen her above anyone else. The journey that began with Charlotte Bennett feeling unwanted had transformed into a future she never imagined. Standing beside Alexander Sterling, she no longer saw herself as the daughter her family rejected. She saw herself as a woman who had discovered her own strength, her own voice, and her own place in the world. The morning after the announcement, Charlotte walked through Sterling Tower and noticed something different. People no longer looked at her with curiosity or doubt. They looked at her with respect. But the greatest change was not how others saw her. It was how she saw herself. Alexander found Charlotte near the large windows overlooking the city. The same view that once represented a world she could never enter now represented everything she had achieved. "You seem peaceful today," Alexander said. Charlotte smiled. "I think I finally understand something." "What is that?" he asked. Charlotte looked outside. "I spent so much of my life waiting for someone to tell me I was enough. But I realized I was already enough before anyone noticed." Alexander smiled softly. Those words meant more to him than she knew. From the beginning, he had never wanted Charlotte to become someone else. He admired the person she already was. Over time, their relationship had grown beyond expectations and titles. What started as two people from completely different worlds had become a partnership built on trust and understanding. Alexander had spent years surrounded by people who admired his power but never truly knew him. Charlotte was different. She saw the person behind the title. She saw the man who carried responsibilities quietly and needed someone who could understand him without wanting anything in return. Meanwhile, the Bennett family slowly began rebuilding their relationship with Charlotte. William Bennett no longer tried to control her choices. Instead, he learned to respect them. He understood that love and trust could not be demanded. They had to be earned. One afternoon, William visited Charlotte at Sterling Tower. He looked around the place where his daughter had created a new future. "I used to think success meant having the perfect family image," William admitted. "Now I realize success means appreciating the people who truly matter." Charlotte listened quietly. She knew the past could not be erased, but she also knew forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It meant choosing peace instead of carrying old pain forever. "I am glad you understand now," Charlotte said. "That means more than you know." As time passed, Charlotte continued working beside Alexander, helping expand the Sterling Empire with her unique perspective. She was no longer known as the forgotten daughter of the Bennett family. She was known as a leader, a trusted partner, and the woman who changed the heart of the richest emperor in the world. Years earlier, Charlotte believed losing her family meant losing her future. She was wrong. Losing the place where she was never truly valued allowed her to find a place where she was fully accepted. On a quiet evening, Charlotte and Alexander stood together overlooking the city. The lights below reflected across the glass windows as they remembered how different their lives had been when they first met. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we never met?" Charlotte asked. Alexander looked at her and smiled. "I think we both would have continued searching for something we did not know we needed." Charlotte smiled. She once believed she was the person nobody wanted. Now she knew the truth. She was never someone without value. She was simply waiting for the right person to see it. And Alexander Sterling, the man who had everything except a true connection, discovered that the greatest treasure was not power, wealth, or influence. It was finding someone who chose him for who he truly was. Together, they created a future built not on expectations, but on trust, respect, and a love that proved the person overlooked by everyone else could become the most important person in the world to someone who truly saw her.